Experience a relentless pursuit of justice as an intricately devised inheritance trap ensnares the arrogant, revealing a chilling web of deceit, corruption, and betrayal that will keep you riveted until the very end. I arrived at the elegantly appointed Jefferson and Sons law offices in Maplewood on a crisp autumn morning, my heart pounding with anticipation and a touch of trepidation. At just 26, I had never imagined that the reading of my late father, Robert Davis's will would be such a harbinger of deep-seated family conflict. The room, filled with muted murmurs and the steady tick of an antique clock, exuded a solemn yet charged atmosphere. Across the polished mahogany table sat my cousin, Brandon, whose demeanor screamed arrogance. Dressed immaculately in a tailored suit with shoes that gleamed under the soft lighting, he looked every bit the part of someone who believed that wealth was his birthright. Before the lawyer, Mr. Larson, could even begin, Brandon couldn't contain himself. With a dismissive laugh and a tone dripping with defiance, he declared, "I already took the money, and I spent it all. Good luck getting anything from me." His words, so brazen and flippant, sliced through the still air like a cold wind, leaving me momentarily speechless. Each syllable seemed to underscore not only his disregard for our family's legacy, but also a deep, unspoken rivalry that had long simmered beneath the surface. Mr. Larson cleared his throat and began to read the will, his measured, deliberate voice adding gravity to every word. Yet even as he spoke, I could sense the tension rising, punctuated by the occasional snicker or smirk from Brandon. My hands clenched in my lap as the truth of our father's complex relationships began to unfold. I remembered the bittersweet memories of childhood, the silent battles fought over unspoken grievances, and the realization that today was not merely about inheritance, it was about the exposure of character, ambition, and greed. Every pause, every carefully chosen word from Mr. Larson heightened the drama in the room. The clash between my sense of duty and Brandon's reckless entitlement was palpable. In that moment, I realized that the will reading was more than a simple legal formality. It was the spark that ignited a long overdue reckoning. The air vibrated with the promise of consequences. And while Brandon's laughter had once been a symbol of his carefree arrogance, it now felt like the prelude to an inevitable downfall. The stage was set, the players in position, and as I sat there, I braced myself for the revelations yet to come. No sooner had Brandon's careless laugh faded than Mr. Larson slid a thick folder across the table, its contents poised to shatter Brandon's smug confidence. With deliberate calm, Mr. Larson began unveiling the intricacies of my father's final plan, a masterful inheritance trap designed to test Brandon's greed. As I leaned in, every word he spoke resonated with a quiet authority, punctuated by deliberate pauses that made each revelation hit like a sledgehammer. My father, Robert Davis, had anticipated Brandon's voracious appetite for wealth. He knew that Brandon's unchecked ambition would drive him to seize an early payout, no matter the cost. Inside the folder lay a series of documents, each page meticulously detailing a secondary, dummy trust, a legal setup that, on the surface, mimicked a genuine inheritance. But this was no ordinary trust. It was a cunning test. The documents made it explicitly clear any premature withdrawal or reckless use of funds would trigger a punitive clause, instantly disqualifying Brandon from receiving the true benefits of our father's estate. I listened in disbelief as Mr. Larson explained that this trap was not meant to punish, but to expose a character flaw that had long threatened our family's legacy. The room fell into a heavy silence as Brandon's once confident smirk began to fade. Each page he turned revealed undeniable evidence of his earlier transgressions, irresponsible financial moves, and hasty decisions driven solely by greed. Mr. Larson's voice, steady and unyielding, detailed how every dollar Brandon had taken would now be subject to immediate legal repercussions. The weight of the moment pressed down on us all as the gravity of my father's foresight became painfully clear. In that charged atmosphere, it was unmistakable. My father had set a trap with surgical precision. The dummy trust was not merely a legal maneuver, it was a moral litmus test, a final testament to the values he held dear. His calculated plan ensured that Brandon's misdeeds would come back to haunt him forcing him to confront the consequences of his own avarice. As the documents lay before us, the room filled with a blend of vindication and sorrow, a poignant reminder that sometimes, even in death, a parent's love comes wrapped in lessons of tough love and uncompromising justice. In that charged silence, Brandon's once smug grin melted away into sheer terror and panic. I watched, a mix of grim satisfaction and sorrow, as his confident facade crumbled before our very eyes. His hands began to tremble uncontrollably, and his eyes widened with disbelief as he fumbled through the damning documents. Every page revealed irrefutable evidence of his past misdeeds: reckless withdrawals, unauthorized transfers, and even forged signatures. The atmosphere in the sleek conference room at Harrison and Burke LLP in Oak Ridge shifted dramatically, from one of casual entitlement to an almost palpable sense of impending doom. This can't be real," Brandon stammered, his voice cracking under the weight of undeniable truth. Mr. Larson, with an unyielding calm, methodically reiterated the legal repercussions of every misguided decision he had made. With each measured pause and deliberate inflection, Brandon's bravado gave way to desperate agitation. His pace quickened. He began pacing the polished floor, his footsteps echoing against the high ceilings. Every pause in his frantic tirade was punctuated by a strained laugh, a sound that wavered between defiant protest and a hollow cry for mercy. The tension was almost suffocating. What had started as a routine family gathering had morphed into a high-stakes courtroom drama unfolding in real time. Brandon's vehement protests grew louder, yet they rang hollow against the weight of the evidence laid bare before us. "You're lying! You gotta be messing with me!" he roared, his voice reverberating off the walls, but his words lacked conviction. They were merely the desperate echoes of a man who had lost control. Then, in one final, desperate bid to salvage his crumbling empire, Brandon's eyes darted frantically around the room. In that split second, a chilling resolve took hold. Abruptly, he excused himself, muttering about an urgent need to leave, a hastily conceived escape plan born of sheer panic. The heavy air was thick with foreboding, signaling that this was not the end, but rather the beginning of an unstoppable downward spiral. Within days, whispers of Brandon's frantic flight attempts spread through Oak Ridge like wildfire. His scramble to evade the looming consequences had only sealed his fate further. The once confident man who had believed money made him untouchable now stood on the precipice of a total collapse, a tragic end wrought by his own greed and hubris. In the chaotic days that followed, Brandon's desperate bid for freedom unraveled with brutal swiftness. At New Bridge International Airport, his ill-fated escape came to a crashing halt. With a forged passport in hand and a suitcase bulging with questionable cash, he was intercepted by vigilant border authorities. The once arrogant smirk was replaced by a look of abject terror, a look that told the story of a man cornered by his own actions. Mr. Larson's earlier revelations were merely the opening salvo of a relentless legal onslaught. Almost immediately, every asset connected to Brandon's fraudulent endeavors was frozen. The banks, properties, and even his luxury vehicles were seized, turning his ill-gotten wealth into nothing more than cold, static evidence of his misdeeds. The legal system moved with inexorable force, and soon Brandon found himself ensnared in a web of charges: fraud, theft, and identity fraud, to name just a few. His initial 15-year sentence was later extended to a staggering 35 years without parole, a final crushing verdict that left no room for redemption. I sat in the courtroom, a mixture of relief and solemn reflection swirling within me, as the scales of justice balanced the bitter legacy my father had left behind. The transformation was complete. The man who once flaunted his entitlement now stood humbled before the unyielding might of the law. Every piece of evidence, every signature, every misstep had led him inexorably to this moment of downfall. In a final, symbolic act of retribution, I sent Brandon a brief, unadorned letter that simply read, "Checkmate." Those two words carried the weight of a lifetime's worth of resolve and vindication, a succinct reminder that no amount of wealth or cunning could escape the long arm of justice. That letter was the ultimate punctuation in a saga defined by greed, betrayal, and the inexorable triumph of accountability. Thus ended the chapter of Brandon's audacious defiance, a cautionary tale etched in the annals of our family history. In the cold light of day, it became abundantly clear that unchecked ambition always exacts its price. 6 months had passed since the final courtroom drama, and for a brief period I allowed myself to believe that justice had been served. Yet, on one frigid winter night in Brookhaven, as the clock struck 3 a.m., that fragile sense of peace was shattered. The insistent wail of my security alarm pierced the silence of my home, jolting me awake in a cold, harsh reality. I rushed downstairs, heart pounding, only to discover that someone had attempted to breach my front door. Taped neatly to the door was a single Joker card, its vivid colors and mocking grin a chilling message. This isn't over. Every nerve in my body screamed that this was no random act. It was a deliberate warning from Brandon, a reminder that even behind bars, his reach was not yet severed. Without delay, I contacted Mr. Curtis, a seasoned private investigator known for his unwavering determination and keen attention to detail. Within days, Mr. Curtis's investigation began to peel back the layers of a dangerous network that Brandon had meticulously cultivated. His report revealed that Brandon, now serving a 35-year sentence, had not lost control. Not by a long shot. 3 key operatives were still active on his behalf. First was Marcus Hill, a former accountant whose expertise in financial subterfuge had enabled him to siphon funds and conceal illicit transactions with unnerving precision. Next was Trevor Hayes, a burly enforcer with a notorious reputation for violence, whose intimidating presence ensured that Brandon's orders were carried out without question. Last but by no means least was Jasmine Knight, a sharp and resourceful ex-associate whose strategic acumen had been the linchpin in orchestrating their covert operations. Every detail Mr. Curtis uncovered painted a grim picture, a network driven by greed and loyalty to a man who had long since lost his honor. The Joker card left on my doorstep was not merely a taunt, it was a symbol of their collective audacity, a harbinger of the lengths they were willing to go to unsettle me. As I sat in the dim glow of my study that night, the weight of their impending threat pressed down on me. I knew that if Brandon's minions were allowed to continue their covert maneuvers, nothing in my carefully rebuilt life would remain untouched. With determination hardening my resolve, I vowed then and there that I would not be a victim. I would marshal every resource at my disposal to confront and dismantle this lingering web of betrayal. The battle was far from over, and I was ready to fight back with every ounce of strength I possessed. Determined not to be intimidated by the shadows of Brandon's legacy, I quickly set a countermeasure into motion. Drawing upon the lessons my father had left behind, I meticulously crafted a plan designed to neutralize every threat posed by his remaining cohorts. I began by orchestrating a decoy, a deliberate, well-crafted ruse that made it appear as though I was about to transfer all of my estate's liquid assets into one vulnerable account. Every detail was calculated, every whisper in the right circles, designed to alert those who would act on Brandon's orders. Within days, the trap was sprung. Jasmine Knight, ever the cunning strategist, attempted to withdraw funds using a series of forged documents at the local First American Bank in Westwood. But as soon as she stepped into the bank, the alarm was triggered. The bank manager, who had been discreetly tipped off, signaled the authorities. Jasmine was apprehended on the spot, her plans crumbling before her eyes. Not long after, Marcus Hill was taken into custody when a routine audit revealed discrepancies that could no longer be hidden. And Trevor Hayes, the muscle behind the operation, was detained while attempting to orchestrate a secondary extraction, his arrest sealing the fate of the entire clandestine network. As the news of their swift capture spread, I felt a surge of vindication mixed with the solemn realization that the price of unchecked greed was, indeed, steep. I immediately enlisted the help of the finest legal counsel, determined to ensure that every asset, every scrap of money that Brandon had once thought he could manipulate, would now be redirected to protect what remained of our family's honor. The judge, recognizing the overwhelming evidence and the severity of the betrayal, ruled decisively. Every penny Brandon might ever earn would be forfeited, permanently assigned to my care. In a final resolute act, I composed a letter, short, unembellished, yet laden with the full force of my resolve. Its simple yet powerful message read, "Now you work for me." Those words were not just a declaration, they were a promise that the cycle of retribution had come full circle. In that moment, I knew that justice had been served. With every adversary dismantled and every threat neutralized, the oppressive legacy of Brandon's treachery was finally at an end. The war had been long and bitter, but in the end, I had reclaimed not only my inheritance, but also my future. free at last from the specter of betrayal. To conclude, this story reminds us that the relentless pursuit of justice prevails over greed and deceit. Every twist from a father's clever trap to the eventual downfall of a self-assured wrongdoer illustrates that integrity and accountability are timeless virtues. Let this narrative serve as a lesson. No act of betrayal escapes consequence, and true strength lies in standing up for what is right. I hope you are as inspired as I was by this journey through hardship, redemption, and the power of truth. Thank you for sharing this experience with me. If you enjoyed this tale and wish to hear more stories that challenge and uplift, please subscribe for future videos. Your support encourages us to keep bringing you compelling and meaningful narratives. Together, let's continue to celebrate the triumph of honesty and cura.